Salwete Legionaries. As you can see here, we don't have an introduction this time, and that is because we were demonetized on our last video because apparently our introduction had some monetized content. So unfortunately for that, we're just going to have to go off the dome and give you an introduction ourselves. But today's a very special day for multiple reasons. It's the first time Moons and I are streaming on YouTube, X, and Kick. So if we're looking at our phones, it's just to make sure that the different streams are working on the different sites, which we'll be doing presently. But we're also here to talk about a very special someone on the timeline, being one such Alysa Leo, who's kind of become a little bit of a popularity craze on X recently. But without further ado, I'm going to start checking to make sure our links are good. In the meantime, Moons, how have you been? You with me, Moons? We're having technical difficulties. You with me, Moons?
Oh, I see. Yeah, I'm here. I'm here. Do you see me?
Okay. Yeah, just say hello to the Legionaries while I make sure that we're live.
I don't think. Crap. It says that you're live on X, but I don't see a post for it.
Yeah, so that happens sometimes. So I just have to make an individual post and we'll be able to share it. So Legionaries, bear with us. Greetings from the Golden State, Holy Vine of David. Hello, Holy Vine of David. Good to see you here. We're just going to be doing a couple of household things to share. Yeah, I just got to share. And once we share everything, we'll be able to talk about the excellent topic. But I'm going to do that really quick. In the meantime, Moons, say some words for the Legionaries.
I don't have much to say. I do have things to say about your article that I thought was really interesting. But I am hoping to get some new people today, considering that we are streaming on multiple platforms. So that's always very exciting.
Absolutely. This is a cool thing. We're on Kick. We were going to be on Twitch, but unfortunately, I'm a little bit broke right now, so I can't afford the $88 StreamYard charges to be able to stream on more than 3 things. So right now we're doing Kick, X, and YouTube. We're going to see how that goes. But while I'm just checking every link to make sure we're good there, you said you had some thoughts about the article. So I guess some preliminary thoughts, Moons. What are your preliminary thoughts on the article I just published?
Well, I had a few things in mind. I think the first one being that I definitely resonated with a lot of it because I am a mixed person, even though both of my parents are fully Brazilian. Like, what does that even mean, right? In the context of like Brazil and its history, with colonialism, etc. And I often do encounter that issue that you mentioned in your article, where like, oh, are you brown? Are you white? It's like if I tell someone I'm brown, they're like, no, you're white as hell. If I tell someone I guess that right. If I tell someone I'm white, they're like, oh no, you're brown as hell. But if I tell someone I'm brown, they're like, oh no, you're white as hell. So it's like, what is it, right? And I've also had instances in which the same person will call me both, depending on the context. So I think I'm kind of like on that same boat. It's like, oh, what is it? But also it's like its own identity. Also with being Brazilian, you're Latino, but you're not Hispanic either. So like you kind of fall under like the Hispanic umbrella, but also not really because we don't speak Spanish and we have our own like colonial history. And so yeah, I kind of just like resonated on with you on that. And what else did I have in mind?
Maybe I actually have some questions for you, Moons, because I think what's unique about, because obviously you're Brazilian and I myself am half Asian, half white. And I think largely we don't fit in with this sort of leftist blob, which tries to make us undifferentiated, which tries to make us the same. We want a distinct identity. And in the essay, I wrote about how you're not really Asian, right? And I think you could probably experience this the same as well. You're not really Brazilian in America. They try to sort of map you into this general, you're brown, right? You're part of the minority group, which has to be in opposition to generally to white people. I think it's interesting that the left really does more than anyone else try to stifle actual diversity and positive identity. So I was wondering if you personally have experienced any of that being Brazilian, where they kind of just want you to be part of this mass minority victim sort of ethnos rather than expressing yourself in a unique way, which, is the big thrust of the argument.
I will say from my experience, I think that both the left and the right are really race obsessed, and how they approach me and my racial identity has varied within both groups. Because I've gotten a lot of leftists automatically put me into the group of white people, and therefore I'm privileged and I can't really speak on like brown people struggles. But then I've also had leftists be like, "Oh no, you're not white, you're brown. You have to advocate for your people." So like, um, I get both from the left, but also on the right. I've had particularly like right wing white men who are really into Brazilian women. Like they will do whatever they can to argue that Brazilians are white, which is like yes, but no. Like Brazil is so diverse. Brazil is like akin to the United States, in which we have anything and everything over there. So like you have your Adriana Limas and your Gisele Bunches that are like super white, but then you have like everything else there, right? Um, but I've also had people on the right like telling me that I should be deported because I'm brown. So it's like, what is it? Like I really don't. There's no consensus within any group on how I am perceived.
I think what's interesting about that and the sort of political expediency, taking it away just from American politics in general, I think the issue the right makes is essentially giving certain ethnic groups no choice but to be leftist, where I don't want to associate with this sort of minority cult of victimhood. I don't want to be a victim. I don't want to be somebody that just sees themselves as oppressed. I want to have a positive vision as a Hapa that includes celebrating my white ancestry, which has a history of conquest. It has this history of civilization building throughout the world, and also my Asian side, which also has a very old history. I mean, older in a lot of ways than Western history. So there's a lot of beauty in both sides. And I think what's interesting about Asians, right? Asians
Mhm.
really aren't a victimized minority like people want to make them out to be. They are making more money than white people generally. And yet they're supposed to align with, I guess, quote unquote, brown interests because it allows this sort of block to emerge against white people and then to politically act against white people. So it's this interesting thing where there's no real true Asian identity either. And despite the fact that Asians suffer a lot of the same systematic issues as whites do, for example, now affirmative action's gone, but really in practice, I don't think it's gone. But affirmative action disproportionately affects whites and Asians. It doesn't help East Asians or even just regular Asians getting into college. They're also struggling with that same barrier because of racial quotas, which are going to generally benefit Hispanics, blacks, etc. So it's interesting when they try to force this sort of identity of victimhood upon people who are like either non-white or on the fringes like us, right? Because we both have white ancestry and then we
Mhm.
also have non-white ancestry. So I guess what I kind of wanted to explore and get your thoughts on this, what do you think politically in terms of expediency the right has to do, learning from the mistakes of the left to sort of say, okay, clearly, white people want to advocate for their interests and it makes sense. I mean, they make up 7% of the global population. But then at the same time, recognizing that there's also another identity of people who are either, like I said, on the fringes or non-white like Asians that want to have a positive identity, but they're not allowed to either by the left or the right.
You're asking me like, what do I think the right has to do?
Like how can we show that this is a necessary sort of political expediency to say, okay, uh, clearly there has to be some cooperation, but it's not threatening to the fact that, like, look, at a certain level, people try to talk about H1B1, for instance, right? That's clearly also not good. Oh, as long as we let the highly skilled, intelligent immigrants come in, it'll all be okay. But clearly, that also disproportionately affects Native Americans, and I mean Native, more widely, and then specifically white Americans as well. So I think there's like a balancing act where you have to show the right, hey, there is another form of identity that isn't white that also wants to express themselves in a more right wing variety that exists. And there should be an effort not to sort of just push that to the side and allow it to get subsumed in this sort of leftist block of undifferentiated racial identity.
I don't know. I have like hot takes in regards to this. Um, And I don't want to come across any sort of way, but I think this like um over identifying with race is kind of cringe. And like both the left and the right do it, right? Like they both like over identify with race. They like look for these like racial signifiers and markers and people to like categorize them and like decide whether or not they want to respect that person or not, whatever it is. And I just feel like it's all kind of cringe. Like I don't think I have like a lot of like intellectual thoughts in regard to it aside. And I think that also might be coming from my own bias, given that like I am a person who like lives in the ambiguity of it all. Um, but I just think it's kind of cringe. And I think if you want to win any kind of like cultural narrative, you have to be cool. If you have I think of like Donald Trump, the reason he won, partly I feel like it's because he came across a lot cooler than Kamala Harris, where she came off as cringe. Like I do think at the end of the day, whatever it is that you want to dominate like the mainstream and masses, you ultimately just have it to make it appealing to people.
I totally agree. And again, it is a balancing act because if you ignore race altogether, I think that's also a problem. But clearly, uh, you're not going to achieve your goals as white Americans by just saying, okay, we're going to go full patriot front, start marching with masks on and stuff. There, I mean, I think the fact of the matter is that not only are you dealing with the fact that America is 40% non-white, but also within the white population, a lot of those people are leftists, right? So there's multiple angles to this where you're going to have to, like, if you just got rid of immigration, it wouldn't necessarily solve the problems either, because you're still going to have a large subset of the white population that's leftist. So I think it's an interesting balancing act. And the whole thing with Hapaborean identity that I'm trying to hyperstatize is the idea that, identity does matter, because it clearly does matter. And the reason it matters is because if you don't have any identity, I think you are reduced to a consumer functionally. If you have no positive symbolic identity, which is greater than mere sensation in life, what's stopping you from becoming, the Gooner and Gooner accelerationism and living only for pleasure and sensation? The only alternative to that is reasserting symbolic value. And this symbolic value is tied to your identity. And of course, it's not just race, it's also religion, it's also tradition, culture. But the whole Hapaborean thing is that first and foremost, what do we see? We do see race. And race sort of ends up bleeding into culture and religion and tradition. So for me, as somebody who's a Hapa, the whole point of the Hapaborean hyperstition of asserting a nominal Hapaborean identity is to essentially say, okay, here's an identity. If we're lacking one, we're going to create one. And we're going to create one because we don't want to just be reduced to this base tabula rasa consumer, which I think the left is trying to do with race. And it's just clearly evident in, your second generation Americans, what really defines them, because they're not quite American, but they're also not quite the people that they came from. They're essentially just a consumer. That's what identifies the human subject in modernity. So I think identity does matter, and it is tied to race, and race is clearly a very real signifier. But I agree with you in that we have to realize that politically, this is a super multifaceted issue. And I don't think that this sort of hardcore, hardline stance on race is really possible in America. So I agree with you in that.
Yeah, I also will say with the whole like first gen Americans, I am first gen, and I wouldn't necessarily like boil myself down to consumer. And the parts of myself that are consumers, I don't think has anything to do with like my like a racial or ethnic I guess like how I identify myself. But also I was thinking like a counter argument being like there are lots of people who very much know who they are and have like pure blood like white or pure blood black and have been in the US since the beginning of the US, and they don't know anything besides TikTok, porn, and Uber Eats. So like these are people with like staunch identities, like very strong identities, but they are still like some of the biggest consumers in this country.
I think it's true, but I also think that largely it's because none of those people actually have even a positive identity to assert, despite the fact that they've been here so long. And that the whole, I guess, we were talking about the system of objects a few weeks ago. The whole system of objects does slowly degrade any reference to the real in terms of identity, right? That's what we were reading. And I think that applies also to ethnicity, because it doesn't matter if, like, for example, on my father's side, I can trace my ancestry back to, I believe, 1650 from Kent, England. So they were in the Revolutionary War, Civil War, World War I, World War II, all that, right? But if you don't remember who you are, so to speak, if you don't remember the sort of shared history that you have as a people, as an identity, and you don't recognize the Da sign of a folk, then it absolutely becomes exactly what you're arguing here, where you don't see ethnos having any sort of viable manifestation in society. And in America, people don't really know where they come from. One of the things I wrote about in my essay, well, I actually wrote 2 essays, so I don't know which essay I wrote this on, because I'm going to publish another one on Substack in a bit, which is basically the same essay with a little bit more of a philosophical bent. And the whole thing that I'm trying to talk about here is that a lot of times growing up, a lot of white people would say, oh, I'm just white, which would imply that somehow it'd be better to be non-white, because they feel that non-whites have a more authentic cultural expression, more authentic Da sign, if we're going to bring in Heideggerian language, which isn't true, right? Like, white people have an identity and they have a history and they have a shared past. But in America, because I think fundamental to the American mode of being, there isn't any fail-safe to ensure that a positive identity continues throughout the forces of capitalism over time. There was nothing in the Constitution or in the ethos of the American people that said we're going to retain some form of identity. You got rid of that when you allowed for religious expression, when you allowed for essentially economic interests to take priority over symbolic interests. So, I mean, I totally agree with you. I mean, you don't see people remembering their past. And I think that's a problem, because I think when you don't remember your past, or you don't, in my case, as somebody without a clear past, if you don't either have a past or you don't hyperstatize and mythicize a past to be able to inform the direction of where you're symbolically going to go in the future, then you're just going to become the base consumer. You're just going to be ensconced in the system of objects, and your desires are going to be not driven by that symbolic value, but by capital and capitalism. I don't know if you agree with that.
Yeah, I guess, like, I am kind of confused on where the argument comes from that if you are aware of your past, and you're less likely to become a consumer. Because in the argument with, like, white and Black Americans, these people are also very much aware, for the most part, of their past. Maybe not exactly where they came from, but kind of like their historical, like, colonial, I don't know, they have, like, some kind of vague idea, or at least a hell of a lot better than I do, right? Like, I refuse to take a DNA test because for multiple reasons. But I have no idea, aside from, like, okay, the Portuguese, maybe somewhere in Africa, native Brazilian, and I think some other countries. But I don't know exactly, like, how to pinpoint my ancestry, so I don't necessarily know my past outside of my parents themselves. Like, even, like, with my own grandparents, I don't necessarily know what their lives were like, because I'm so disconnected from my own ancestry. But I still, with that, I find identity through other means, whether it's, like, spirituality, my studies, hobbies, the I guess the lineage that I'm starting now, right? Like, I may not know my ancestry, but I know that I'm starting a lineage from here on out that is Brazilian American.
I think that's the importance of hyperstatizing some symbolic value to sort of guide or orient yourself in the future. And that's what you have to do if you don't have a past. But just briefly, I would disagree with you in terms of white and Black Americans, because first of all, Black Americans don't know what tribe they came from Africa. I think my essay probably seemed a little bit harsh and critical, because I talked about Black and Hispanics as sort of the lowest common denominator where ethnos goes to. But I'm not really blaming this on Blacks or Hispanics. I'm really blaming this on the left, because the left sees them as generally the most unsuccessful ethnic group in America. And of course, with Hispanics, it's a lot more nuanced. But let's say, generally speaking, right, Hispanics and Blacks. So the left uses them as the means of saying, okay, here's the marginalized people. Let's bring ourselves down to identify with the most marginalized people. And that's what levels society from having any positive identity and just sort of identifying with this mass blob. So I don't blame Blacks or Hispanics for being part of that. I don't blame them. And, of course it's, I have this friend who's Ethiopian, for instance, and he tries to hypersatize this Abyssinian history. And I think it's a positive thing. If you're Black, you should try to find your roots or hypersatize one. So I'm not in any way excluding people from the idea that they can create a racial destiny. However, it's clear that Blacks and Hispanics have very easily been manipulated to support the leftist agenda.
Okay, but so can I just say real quick that that blobbing of Black and Latinos into one group is very much imposed by white people?
Leftists, though, specifically.
White leftists, white liberals, whatever, but white people nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, and then to a certain degree, right, what we're talking about with the right, a lot of times if you're a non-white and you're trying to have a positive, quote unquote, right-wing identity, that's also kind of pushed back so that you end up in the left. So the right's definitely complicit in this as well. But being on the political right, I'm trying to make the case that say, hey, this is not a good strategy, right? Especially with Hapas, because Hapas do have an interesting synthesis, because a lot of the times Asians do generally, and when I say Asians, I mean Oriental Asians. So I'm talking east of India or east of Bangladesh. So that's Myanmar outwards, including like Central Asian countries like Kazakhstan and whatnot. That to me is what I mean by Asian generally. And generally Asians have proven that they can build civilizations and they can function civilizationally. Therefore, this sort of disdain for I guess chaos, right, doesn't really apply to the Asian ethnos. So when you try to take away a positive identity that either Asians or Hapas or whatever want to have that can be positive for civilizational building, and you say no, you sort of dissuade that and discourage that, then they're inevitably going to come to the left because there's no other option. And I think it's an interesting phenomena that's very clear in the United States, in which case I completely agree with you. But on the point I was trying to make with Blacks and Hispanics is I do think that Blacks and Hispanics should try to find a form of racial consciousness, right? And I think that they should also find a positive vision for their identity. But the problem is that they're so manipulated to just be part of this leftist blob and to say, well, the welfare state, I can just get away with living off of taxes and I can live off of white people. Why would I want to not be a victim? Why would I want to have a positive identity? So I absolutely, I encourage that. And like I said, I have a friend who's Abyssinian and he tries to create a myth of Abyssinia. I think that's absolutely what he should be doing. And what everyone should be doing in general. But I think it's clear that certain demographics are more easily affected by this sort of leftist experiment. And that has to be realized too. But I haven't been reading too many of the comments, but I got my good buddy here who I was on his podcast. He says, what's your take on Mencius? So I assume, are you talking about the Chinese Mencius or like Mencius Moldbug as in Curtis Yarvin? Just to clarify that for me really quick. But there's a couple other good comments as well. TradDad9172 said, knowing your family line is how to know a base of yourself. And that's why I talk about the axis of being. Because one problem, I think, when you try to just select a form of identity that you don't have any relationship to, it becomes a LARP. And it becomes a simulation in the Baudrillardian sense. You have to be somewhat what you are already. You have to build off of what you are already. And I use the example in my essay, Caesar and the Axis of Being, that Julius Caesar could not be a Han Chinese person. He had to be a Roman. And he could change the identity of being a Roman because he changed it from transitioning from the Republic to the Empire. But he was still first and foremost a Roman. And I think when you try to be something you're not, it becomes a LARP. And I talked about this with all these, you have a lot of Mexicans that try to be Nazis or they try to be National Socialists. I'm like, no, National Socialism was a sort of culmination of German idealism, which is identified by Heidegger and even Carl Jung. So it's whether you're, and I'm not saying go be a Nazi, but the only people that could be a Nazi were the Germans, the same way that the only people who could be Han Chinese are Han Chinese. The only people that could be Romans are Romans. That's not true, actually, because over time you had Gauls who were Romans, but generally that allegory stands. But you have to be what you are based on what you already are. So I guess my question for you, Moons, is do you agree with that? Or do you think you could just kind of hypersthetize whatever you want? Like, do you have to have a base in something, an axis of being, or can you just sort of engage with the flux of multiplicities?
Yeah, before going into that, I did want to ask you, because I actually didn't do my research on this. What is the origin of Hapaborean? Like, what is that? Where does that word come from? Like, why not just use Wasian?
So I kind of touch up on it in the essay, But Hapaborean, I've heard a lot of people claim that it's their word, like they came up with it. But I don't really know where it first started. I think it's kind of just a natural word jump from Hyperborean to Hapa, then adding Borean. So it's sort of saying, it's sort of connecting the Hapa element to the sort of European mysticism of Hyperborea. So I don't really know where it comes from. So I'm kind of trying to I'm doing some Platonic amnesis right now. You know, amnesis, where you have to remember what you already know. That's what I'm doing with Hapaboreanism, and I'm touching all these objects which remind me of Hapaborea. For example, I have some Arni sticks right here I got them when I was deployed. Well, not deployed, but I had a military exercise in the Philippines, and I bought these hand carved Arni sticks. And when you touch the Arni sticks, assuming you have some Austronesian ancestry, then the blood memories are awakened and you have this amnesis and you start to remember who you are, so to speak. So long story short, Moons, I don't mean to drab on, but I don't really know where it comes from. But it's kind of a little bit of, you have to look at your past as a European, you have to look at your past as an Asian, and you have to find all the best elements. And then you create a myth of the future based on that, which is what the Turkmen dictator did, Niyazov. And last thing I'll say, because I don't want to drone on, I've been ranting a bit, is the Wasian thing. I think it's a psyop, honestly. And here's why. I think Wasian is a psyop to create the sort of unmasculine, passive, half Asian, half white person who goes to the BLM riots, protests, goes to BLM protests, drink matcha, drinks boba, milk tea, is sensitive to his feelings. He's leftist. He cares about the plight of minorities. He protests ICE, whatever. I think it's a psyop that takes away Hapas and Asians from identifying with their more master morality side. So I think the word itself just has a passive Orwellian connotation, like Wasian. Like, that doesn't sound cool. Now, Hapa, that sounds masculine. That sounds assertive. That sounds like it has some thumos and force to it. So I affirm the Hapaborean identity primarily because of, one, the Orwellian connotation of Wasian, just in terms of how it's uttered, and then just kind of where I see the term Wasian socially gravitating towards, if that makes sense.
No, I definitely get that, because I usually hear the word Wasian in terms of, like, I usually hear them from, like, skinny white guys or, like, talking about their girlfriends. Usually.
Yeah, like that safe sleazy meme. You know what I'm talking about?
No.
Shout out to Pill Eater. I did a podcast with him. It'll come out Friday, but he has this meme where it's kind of like that, like anyway, I'm not going to go into that too much, but Jay Shaw said Wasian is cringe. I agree completely. We're Hapas here. Be a proud Hap. It's kind of like what Jared Taylor said when that Australian guy was saying, like, as a white male, he says, "You're not a white male. You're a white man." That's why I'm saying with Wasian, you are not a Wasian male. You are a Hapaborean man. Accept that as a positive identity. Don't be part of this pathetic leftist blob. Assume a positive identity which venerates the greatness of your ancestors on both your European and Asian side. Venerate that ancestry. Use it as like an Apollonian and Dionysian, where I'd say Asian is more Apollonian and the European is more Dionysian, Faustian, and creative, whereas the Asian's more ordered, community, family-oriented, right? So it's an interesting dynamic, and it sort of works as like a Hegelian dialectic, a synthesis throughout history towards the manifestation of the Overman. Maybe we'll mix Nietzsche and Hegel there a little bit. Maybe that's sacrilegious. I don't know. But what did Nikolai say? Nicola, 4th century BCE one. Oh, yeah, I don't really know much about Mencius. I know more about Curtis Yarvin, unfortunately. The only Asian thinkers from that time I've read were like Confucius, Lao Tzu. I guess the Buddha doesn't really count because that's more like India. But what do you think of Eurasianism in this context? Oh, he said epic. What do I think about Eurasianism in this context? Yeah, so we're not using it in the Duginist context. We're using it more so in the terms of taking the higher castes of Asia and Europe and combining it, right, without threatening either. Because I don't want to see great replacement happen. I don't want to see white people just fall off the face of the map. I don't want that. And I also don't want East Asians to. Japanese are suffering birth rate collapse. Koreans are suffering birth rate collapse. I don't want to see that either. So I want to preserve and protect both Asia and Europe, because I think there's beauty in both. And on another degree, I don't have any actual hatred towards people in the global South. I don't have hatred. It's just practical that you have to limit mass immigration, you have to protect your borders, you have to protect your identity. So it's not hatred so much as love for what you have already. But anyway, I've been droning on. I'm so sorry, Moons. I just keep
No,
talking. I'm sorry.
no, you asked me a question about prior to me asking about the Hapaborean stuff, regarding whether or not I think knowing your past is like important to like build up on. Oh, wait, like you asked me something like that, like knowing your past in order to like as like a foundation to like build like your future or something like that.
I could reframe the question really quick. So basically, do you need to, because I would argue you need an axis of being, something that doesn't change, that's fundamental to your being, that can't be changed. And you can add to that. But if you just get lost in the multiplicities and the flux, that's where you get transgenderism. That's where you get the Troon culture. That's where you get this femboy nonsense and the non-binary stuff. It's from forgetting that you have core aspects of your being that should be concrete and should enslave your being. And that's where true freedom comes from. Because I say that true freedom comes from a certain enslavement of your being to certain predeterminations. Because if you could be anything, you can't be anything. And that's my whole argument with the axis of being. So I basically, do you agree with that or do you disagree?
Like, yes and no. Again, I think I am biased because I live in the ambiguity of it all. Like, not only am I like racially ambiguous with a very mixed like ethnic background, at least ancestrally, and also I'm also first gen, which means that like I'm not fully Brazilian, but I'm also not fully American. I I get a lot of like my core identity from, I guess, like my is like short-lived history thus far, like just like, my own life, as opposed to relying on some kind of um like history of my people.
Well, for example, you're a woman, right? And you like being feminine.
Yeah, there's that.
That's an axis of being, right? You may not feel like Brazil has a history, but when you go back to Brazil, don't you feel a very strong tie, which warms your heart and makes you feel good, right?
Yeah, I went back to Brazil for the first time in 13 years last month or 2 months ago. I went 2 months ago for about 2 weeks. Again, my first time in over a decade back there. And the reason I spent so long without going back is because I always had this kind of like hatred in my heart growing up towards my country. Like I always
Mhm.
felt very proud of being Brazilian because there's like positive connotations to that, like being fun and beautiful and all this stuff that people like attribute to being Brazilian. But I didn't necessarily like my country because of all the things that go on there. But then going back as an adult, and going to places that are frankly like fun and exciting. I did feel like a sense of like belonging. It's like I looked around and I felt like most people could be my cousin. Like it was for the first time where in a long time, where I looked around and people looked like me, which I thought was very exciting. And even though like I have somewhat of like an American accent when I speak Portuguese, people still like treated me as like their own, which was really, really nice.
Absolutely. That would be an axis of being to me. Like that's something that
Mhm.
is part of your being and unchanging, and you can rely on that as an anchor. And really quick, I just want to shout out to my friend Pessimistic Idealism. I've been friends with him for a bit. Yeah, you love Brazil. Come to Brazil. You know that thing. Come to Brazil. Come to Brazil. And then I like Brazilians too, by the way. I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu growing up, and my first coach was very Brazilian. He was so Brazilian that when he was 18, he had a 30-year-old girlfriend. That's a very Brazilian thing, like a young guy with an older
No, it
woman.
is.
That's how Brazilian he is. But Pish Chan, I'm sorry if I'm butchering that pronunciation. Awesome article. Wrote you a long comment on it. I will respond to that comment uh, when I get a chance. But I'm glad you enjoyed it. That's kind of we're talking about loosely. I don't even feel like we've talked about Alysa Leo at all,
I've been
have we?
thinking a lot about her lately. I've been thinking a lot about her.
What's your thoughts? Let's get some thoughts on Alysa Leo. I want to hear him.
I mean, again, there are some things that I resonate with, like the racial ambiguity stuff. It's like really interesting for myself, but also her childhood, right? Like being this like little girl who was like always forced to go to practice, and like she had like her diet like watched for her by her like trainers and her father, whatever, and she loved the sport overall, and now she's doing it out of joy, and just seeing the pure like joy out of her when she's skating is insane. And I kind of had, not to the degree of like being an Olympic athlete, obviously, but like I had the typical like immigrant like household where like school is really important. Like I had to do all the chores. Like my parents were really hard on me, and like they were very strict, and I had to like be perfect. And I feel like I still grapple with some like anxieties of like everything has to be done to a T, otherwise I can't really do it. And now I'm learning to do things out of pure joy. And if I fail, I fail. If I succeed, I succeed. But seeing that kind of attitude in her has like really inspired me to like kind of like full force towards the things that I love.
It's really interesting you say that because it reminds me of something that Julius Evola actually said. And really quick, pessimistic idealism. He said she could turn me straight. There's some magical power about her. All right, we're gonna make it happen. Turn you straight, de-gay you, ungayify you. But and I'll respond to Sumerian Savage in a second. But Julius Evola talks about how if somebody is truly of an aristocratic spirit, they're truly the master. They don't do things because they're forced to do them. They do them out of their own desire. And that's sort of an almost Nietzschean transformation for Alysa Leo, where she was like the camel with all the thou shalts on her back. And she eventually had to reaffirm that joy. And then there's an axis of being in that, because her axis of being was that she grew up as a figure skater. She was already good at that. If she just threw that away, she would throw away a core aspect of her being that actually allows her to engage with reality in such a way that's more beautiful, that's more poetic. She now has a poetic relationship with something she used to hate. So I think it's a beautiful thing. And I want to talk more about her, but really quick, Sumerian Savage, who's been he's been a supporter of the channel for a long time, so we love him. I think he has. Haven't you, Sumerian Savage? I feel like I've seen you for a long time and we've talked a lot, but there's a lot of people with similar names. So I'm pretty sure we have. Yes, we have. 2 years, whatever. Good guy. Humans are tribalistic, and that isn't a cultural accident. It's a conserved biological strategy. The human brain is wired for a coalition psychology. I completely agree. Yeah, it's completely true. But the only thing I will say is I think there's also a metaphysical necessity for identity beyond utility and beyond survival, which is what I'm trying to advocate for. Because I think in the face of capitalism and the inhumanities that come with it, we don't want to be Marxist. We don't want to just be the same. We want to affirm a positive identity. And I think that comes from realizing that no, there's not just a utilitarian aspect to tribalism and identity, but a metaphysical one, even if it is nominal. When symbolically asserted, that really affirms being. But what I wanted to talk to Alysa Leo, which is kind of the thrust of my essay, is that aesthetics clearly matter, and that aesthetics largely are the argument behind something like miscegenation. But in the case that you have positive manifestations of these mixes, then clearly you can't use the same argument that, oh, it's bad because it's ugly. And I made the utilitarian case for opposing miscegenation, which is that if you as a white person want to continue your race, then clearly you have to avoid miscegenation on a really large scale. Otherwise, whites will be replaced. So I get that. But what I disagree with is the aesthetic argument, because I think the Hapas do show that there is an aesthetic value to being a Hapa. And same with Brazil, right? Like, you may be mixed race, but it doesn't mean that aesthetically you're somehow just, thrown out. And granted, I made the caveat that I don't personally find certain mixes attractive, and that's not to shit on that. Like, if you're born into something, you have to find the positives in it. Even if you're butt ugly, you got to find a positive in it. You know what I mean? Oh, that's an interesting question from Steve. Do you think Hapas should only date or marry other Hapas? I think it's interesting because I think the Hapa identity is also works in fourths, where if you're like, for example, Bruce Lee was like a weird percentage. He wasn't quite half and half. What the hell are you talking about? Pessimist. I'm not going to say, do you go by your name, Pessimistic? Because I don't want to accidentally say it. So I'm just going to continue calling you Pessimistic. But it just sounds weird saying it. Stop talking Pessimistic. Stop it. I mean, talk, but no more gay stuff, please. Do I think Hapas should only date other Hapas? I think naturally Hapas will gravitate either towards whites or Asians or other Hapas. And me personally, in terms of my racial preferences, in terms of aesthetics, it's the same thing. It's like, I think Hapas are very beautiful. White people, Asian people. I think that will happen naturally. But for a racial consciousnness around Hapa identity to evolve, it kind of has to primarily include whites and Asians, right? And I'm not constraining race into this concept. This is just a necessity for the Hapaborean racial identity. So if you weren't that thing, you wouldn't be a Hapa. right? So yeah, generally speaking, Asians, whites, or other Hapas. Is the Earth flat? I don't know. I think it's a donut. I think the Earth is a donut. Oh, I can call you Ryan. Okay, pessimistic idealism. Okay, good. I can call you Ryan. I just wasn't sure if you went by your name. Steve said, white nationalists can't seem to decide if it's okay to take a Hapa partner or not. So we exist in this weird space. Yeah, I mean, it's a good point, right? Because if you're white passing, like I knew a guy who was a fourth
the
black.
most racist,
Hmm.
the most racist white guys I know all have Latina wives, like all of them.
Oh man, it's like Nick Fuentes, right? Nick Fuentes is the Nick Fuentes effect. Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I mean, I would say my personal take, right, is largely it is phenotypical because I knew a guy, one of my good friends growing up. I'm still friends with him. He's a fourth black, and he does not look black at all. He looks 100% white. So would you say, "Oh, you dirty black, you can't race mix with me"? I mean, it would just be stupid because he looks completely white. And you can imagine if you had kids with a white woman, they would look completely white. So I mean, at a certain point, the purity stuff, you have to say, okay, like Emil Maurice was an eighth Jewish, and he was like Hitler's personal chauffeur and one of the most honored figures in the SS. So it's like, at what point are you going to purity spiral, which is interesting. It's a cube. That's right. The Earth is a cube. It's the Leo flu. She possessed my mind. I love it, Ryan. I love it. De-gayify you. What about Eurasian? Yeah, we talked a bit about Eurasianism, but my identity of Eurasianism is not the Duganist one. It's more so a Hapa one. I had a Hapa girlfriend, and that bitch was cray-cray. Super cute, though. That's a common phenomena. That is a common phenomena. Hapa women can be very cray-cray. But that's, I think, largely because there's no identity for Hapas. And when you don't have identity, you go crazy. And that happens. But sorry, Moons. I really apologize. It's just something I'm really passionate about. So I'm talking a lot about it. But I apologize for not letting you speak more. I just, the Hapaboreanism in me.
Hey, I'm not a Hapa. I don't have many Hapa comments to make on the Hapa topic.
Well, we'll have to do a mestizo Borea because you're basically a mestizo, right? Or mestiza. I apologize.
I don't even know. Like, my family's so varied. Like, I honestly, truly cannot pinpoint.
But come on, I can tell. You're a mestiza. It's okay. Mestiza Borea. I think Hapa men seem to come out worse than Hapa women. I don't think that's true. I think because of Elliot Rodger, we assume that every Hapa guy is going to become a school shooter when you don't recognize that Elliot Rodger's parents were like divorced since he was like 2 and hated each other and turned.
Was he half Asian?
Yeah, his dad was white and his mom was Asian. His dad's a complete narcissist, total psychopath. Like, of course, his fucking kid's going to turn out fucked up. It's not because he's like, look, I agree. I think there is a proclivity to mental health issues and Hapas, but clearly this is an exaggeration because of Elliot Rodger that they think, they think that a Hapa man can't function properly. I mean, look at Keanu Reeves, Brandon Lee, Bruce Lee, Henry Golding, that bloke who is on that show, The Warrior. He's been going around using Peaky Blinders, right? Myself, like, am I struggling? I'm not struggling. I'm completely mentally sane, Legionaries. I'm your racially ambiguous Fuhrer. You know what I mean? No, I'm playing. Hispanidad. Is that like a cool Hispanic slogan? That's another thing with Hispanics. Like, you can't really say one people's Hispanic because you have a Hispanic who's 90% Spanish and you have a Hispanic who's like 100% Aztec Amerindian. That's an interesting whole mix as well. And I love Aztecs, by the way. You got to read Marcel Mauss's anthropology that's cited by Baudrillard and Georges Bataille. It's fascinating. I'm a big supporter of the Aztecs. I know everyone said, "Oh no, human sacrifices, we need to stop them." No, they were kind of based, actually. I'm sorry, they were kind of based. Like, look, if you were on the receiving end, it wouldn't be so based. But I think there's something very beautiful about it.
It was like the Aztecs, the Mayans, and what's the other one? I can't remember right now.
Incas.
Yeah, the Incas. There you go. I listened to like a video like some years ago, like on all of them, and they were pretty cool. They had some cool shit going on.
In some ways, they were very technologically advanced. I think one of the things that the early conquistadors said is they were so surprised how much bigger the Aztec cities were than European cities. That's another thing. If you're Hispanic, you have a positive identity to pull from that isn't just European. I mean, they're kind of Hapaboreans, but like half Hispanic or whatever. They have a beautiful past to cling to. Don't try to become part of this leftist blob. Don't try to become part of this neo-Marxist bullshit. Embrace who you are. Become a fucking Aztec. You know the meme where it's like the guy who claims to be an Aztec is blonde hair, blue eyed. The guy who claims he's a conquistador is like completely brown. Is that true?
I've seen that. But also, one thing I found interesting, I've Googled this a few times growing up, is like, why do native Latinos, like the Aztecs and shit, Are you there with me? Oh yeah. Why do they look Asian?
Well, because they
Tell
are
me not.
Asian. They are
Yeah,
Asian.
yeah.
Yeah.
Because wasn't it connected with Asia like
The
many
Landbirds in
years?
Alaska.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
they are Asian, literally. They just because of genetic bottlenecks, they manifested in a way that phenotypically, and of course genetically, right? Because of disease resistance and all that. Like they are different than Asians, but yeah, originally they were the Proto Asians who, again, through genetic bottlenecks, developed different traits. So yeah, I mean, in a nutshell.
Yeah, I don't know because they do look like if you were to grab like a lot of like Central American folks and like I don't know like Filipinos or even like I don't even know like Vietnamese people and like put them in a room together, some of them could mix.
Yeah, I mean, I think in Apocalypto, right? Like some of those motherfuckers look basically Filipino. Apocalypto, great movie. Mel Gibson. We love Mel Gibson. Don't drink and drive, kids. Don't drink and drive. You end up saying anti-Semitism if you drink and drive, and you should only do that sober. So don't be anti-Semitic when you're drunk because it's going to be pulled against you. But shit, Alyssa Leo, right? I just don't want to lose that topic because we put her in the thumbnail. So I feel like we would be
Oh,
shitting on. Yeah,
I wanted to ask you, because in your article you did say that one of the things that makes her so attractive to people is that she has this like authentic femininity to her that isn't like overly forced, right? Like it isn't like the hypersexualized like bimbo sort of like aesthetic and like tend to go towards. One thing I did find interesting though is that she has a very typical like alternative look with the hair and the piercings and whatnot. And I still and so with that, I found it interesting that like right-wing men have this attraction towards her despite her very like alt slash like left coded aesthetic.
I think it kind of comes with this idea that as a Hapa, you don't have a past. You kind of have to manifest subcultures to exist. And I will say that, right? Like I grew up in the same area basically that Lisa Leo grew up in. And you know, it's kind of a common aesthetic that she's adopted. I would say she's like a little bit more stereotypically the NorCal aesthetic. Like no, very few people are that full on. But it's interesting because one of the great advantages of the Hapa, which is also his great weakness, is because he has no past, right? He has the hypersensitized one, which means you do end up having a more sort of flamboyant identity, which involves sort of experimenting with different subcultures. But it's authentic with her. It's not because she's trying to look alt. It's because she grew up in an area where that sort of thing was acceptable and encouraged. So if you talk about like authentic mode of being in terms of on the micro scale with subcultures, that's just it's normal. She's not like, all right, let me go on a little tangent here. Lesbian women are more manipulatable than a marine on Libo in Jacksonville, drunk talking to a stripper named Candy, who's on her third divorce, has 3 children with 3 different men. One of like 2 of them are mixed, right? The third one, he might be white. And she's cracked out every night after she's done dancing. Lesbian women are more manipulatable than that Marine. And this is true in terms of queer baiting. Chapel Roan is not fucking gay, okay? Chapel Roan likes men, but these Jewish Hollywood elites, they know that if you queer bait and you try to appeal to the lesbian aesthetic, then you're going to get more viewers. And they're so pathetic. Oh my God, what's going on? 1 second. My cat did something stupid. Oh my God. Can you hear
Oh,
me? My cat, she played
yeah,
some
we can hear you.
Kanye West. Not that one song, but a different song. I don't listen to that on this computer at least. What I was saying is the lesbian aesthetic or whatever sells. And these Jewish Hollywood people, they know how to do it. So they get fucking Chapel Roan to queer bait. They get all these different actresses to queer bait. I guarantee you they're going home to a guy at the end of the night. So that's inauthentic. So what I'm getting at with Alyssa Leo is she has an alt aesthetic, but she's not at that alt aesthetic because of capitalism or because some Jewish executive is telling her to do it. It's an authentic mode of being. Therefore, when we see her femininity and her gentle femininity, we see that it's real. It's not performative. And that's why men like it. Men, again, they don't need this porn star like partner. That's not what they want. What they want is gentle, authentic, and real connection. And that's what
Do
people
you not
nominally
though?
attach to. Are you muted, or is that on my end? Or were
I
you
don't know.
purposely
I
muted?
don't think I'm muted.
Sorry. You're not purposely muted? Oh, maybe because when she turned on the heartless thing, my headphones. You can still hear me though.
Yeah.
Okay, 1 second. Let me finish my thought, and then I'll pass it to you so I can fix my headphones. But the last thing I'll say on that is that she has an authentic feminine presence. She has an authentic feminine identity, and people can see through that. They can see it's real, and that's what they want. They don't need crazy, hypersexual aesthetic. They just want a woman who they can connect with, and they believe that's her. And I think that authentically, she is a real person, genuine person, and not to mention, right? I think ice skating is very sensual, and it's very artistically sensual, and people like that. They think that she's an artistic person, which she probably is, who can carry her aesthetic in a beautiful way. I think it's that simple. But I apologize, man. I don't know why the audio is not working. I'm just going to try to reset my headphones in the meantime. If you could just talk to the Legionaries.
Just repeat it to you. Double check it. I can double check if it is on my end as well. Let me see.
I can hear you now, by the way.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure that it wasn't me. But so with the whole like hypersexualized thing, it's tough because then I think of like I know this is an outlier, but like Diddy, for example, would take these women who very much loved him and make them into porn stars for his like own like weird like sexual gratification. And I don't think even though that's like somewhat of an outlier, I don't think that's totally um like I don't know. I think it happens a lot more than we think maybe.
Same with the Jewish executive, right? That's sort of either they're putting the queer baiting aesthetic, or they're putting like the sort of bimbo thing. And I'm using the Jewish stereotype because it's funny and because it's hot right now. Everyone wants to talk about the Jewish executives. Obviously, it's not just them, guys. I know. And hey, look, I disavow. It's just jokingly talking about that, of course. Nothing to do with Epstein or anything. But I think it's the same with that, right? Where it's sort of like they know sex sells, and they know if you utilize sex and you commodify the erotic to base sensation, like we talked about in the beginning of the podcast, it's easier to manipulate, right? And it turns people into a consumer, and it takes the sexuality and the spirituality of sex out of it, and it turns it into something that's just for pleasure, which I think is very sad. And yeah, so I mean, I agree with you. Basically, is what I'm saying is I think a lot of women, I think most women are fine at base, but through capitalism, and of course this is the right-wing critique of capitalism, knows what sells, so they utilize everything and they commodify everything. And the same thing is happening with sexuality, because we are sexless compared to the past. Like, we have less sex than the past statistically. So what's changed? Well, what's changed is the gooner is the human subject engaging in the sexual, and the gooner is not engaging in reciprocal sexuality. He's not actually having sex. So I mean, does that kind of like in line with what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I was wondering if like sex is different than finding someone generally beautiful and attractive. Like these men online finding Alysa Liu to generally beautiful and attractive, which she is. Would you argue that perhaps men find like these OnlyFans girls, for example, like not to be like generally beautiful and attractive? Because I would feel like they would say that they are. Maybe they wouldn't maybe publicly admit it because it's like publicly admitting that you're into a prostitute, but that often tends to be the case.
So are you saying that I'm confused? How does like what's the comparison with the attractiveness of Leo? Just trying to
Yeah.
clarify.
Yeah, like, I guess I'm trying to figure out if men find, like, OF girls or whatever it may be to be generally attractive and beautiful, but they just don't
I mean,
admit it publicly because it's shameful.
I mean, that would just depend, right? I mean, anyone could be an OnlyFans creator now. Like a
No, yeah,
million,
but, like,
was it a
the
million?
actually pretty person.
I'm sure they think they're conventionally attractive, but for example, I'm trying to think of a good example in pop culture. Like name a highly sexualized singer, or like female singer or female actress. I'm just trying to think, just for a thought experiment.
Oh, what's her name? Like, I don't know, there's a new pop girl named Sarah Larson that people are really into right now.
I don't know who that is. Can we say
There's
Britney Spears
also
just for
yeah.
just like for like an
Britney
old
Spears,
time?
old Britney Spears at her peak, yeah.
Yeah, and she was sexualized since she was like 10, which is fucking crazy, right? Talk about executives
Yeah.
from a certain demographic shaping the minds of young women. Just kidding, guys. Just kidding. Just kidding. But take Britney Spears. There's a big difference between the sexualizing of Britney Spears and somebody like Anne Hathaway, for instance, where it's like a different kind of attractiveness. One is a little bit more soft spoken and a little bit more, I guess I'm trying to think of the word I would use, but it's just a little bit more, it's less out there. Like people don't generally consider now, of course, when she became
Subtle.
Catwoman, maybe that changed, right? It's more subtle, and they don't really think of Anne Hathaway necessarily as a sex symbol, whereas someone like Britney Spears is so out there, right? So I guess what I'm saying is Alyssa Leo is more in the Anne Hathaway sort of camp, where of course she's conventionally attractive, but is she conventionally attractive the way a supermodel is, or the way that a highly sexualized celebrity is? No, right? Same with Sydney Sweeney. Sydney Sweeney's obviously attractive, but of course she's got a recessed jawline, according to Clav, right? And she does kind of have this derpy face, this droopy face. But what people find endearing about Sydney Sweeney is she's a normal woman. She acts like a woman. She engages in her feminine traits. Now, hers is a little less authentic, right? Like she clearly knows that guys, it sells, sex sells. So the whole thing with Alyssa Leo's authenticity doesn't really apply to Sydney Sweeney, but Sydney Sweeney is simulating an authentic femininity that like you just don't get with someone like Madison Beer. Everyone thinks Madison Beer is attractive, right? Or Tate McRae or something,
Yeah.
right? Like they're famous. They're pretty famous. Like I mean, I think more people find Sydney Sweeney or someone like Alyssa Leo attractive compared to these singers because there's just something more subtle about it and less in your face and more feminine, right? And feminine in a way that feels less performative. So even if Sydney Sweeney is sort of doing a performative femininity, it doesn't feel that way because it's sort of reminiscent of a more earlier traditional form of femininity. And maybe she's just naturally gifted at being able to act that way anyway. So when she tries to emphasize it, it feels less fake and it feels more authentic. Or, sorry, I'm really ranting right now. I apologize so much, Moons. You're being very patient with me. Lana Del Rey, perfect example compared to someone like Sabrina Carpenter. Lana Del Rey is very sexual in a lot of ways in terms of her music and the lyrics, but then she's also not at the same time because her aesthetic is something more reminiscent of like an earlier Americana where there was more of a taboo and shame to sex. So it was a little bit more risque. Whereas in libertine sexuality, this is something that George Bataille talks about, and I wrote about in the essay, I think, is that when you make free love a thing and you put no restrictions on sex, the shame that makes it a little bit exciting is removed and excised from sexuality. And then you just get this thing that's kind of less fulfilling and less exhilarating and less interesting, less erotic. And I think it's exactly the thing with figures like Alyssa Leo, Lana Del Rey, etc., in comparison to these more hypersexualized figures, if that makes sense.
No, that makes sense. One thing that I'm feeling kind of frustrated right now, kind of unrelated to what we're talking about, is that I do feel like I do wish I could be a little bit more censored in these podcasts. I still have to make sure I can be traditionally employed just in case. So I feel like I'm holding myself back, but and so I appreciate you taking the mic and going on your rant at
I'm taking
times.
one for both of us, right? I'm like
Yeah, I
taking the heat
mean,
for both of us.
you said it, not me.
Yeah, and she disavows, by the way. I'm the extreme. Well, because like I have alternative forms of income where I technically don't have to work, and also I'm a HAPA. Well, you're kind of like the equivalent of a HAPA too, so we get away with a little bit more than our white cousins. But yeah, what do you want to talk about for the last sort of bit? Because we're coming up at an hour now.
Yeah, that's a good question. I had a few things in mind earlier. I do want to go back to Alyssa Liu, and I guess like disregarding race, talking about. I do think that Alyssa Liu has been a good omen for the future, like moving forward for young people in terms of like no longer living this kind of like nihilistic sort of doomer attitude, and more so making it cool to want to do things, to want to achieve things, to want to be good at your craft, and that it doesn't have to be um, I mean, painful it will always be, but not but it won't be painful in an unrewarding way. So yeah, I don't know. I do think that she's been a good omen for the future, I think, for young folks.
It's like Amor Fati, and she said that in an interview. Like she's like, I love struggle, right? If you
Yeah.
can love and aestheticize struggle, then it is painful, but it's painful in a productive way, exactly what you're talking about. And she says it herself. So Amor Fati, the love of one's fate, it's this balance of free will with predetermination. We're not completely free. We're not completely predetermined. Things are going to happen to us that are out of our control. It's up to us about how we face them. And that's the whole thing with eternal recurrence, right? The idea that history repeats itself over and over and over again. That's to be taken conceptually, not literally. It's to illustrate that there is no end. We're constantly going to be summiting peaks and then ascending and then summiting it again. And it's going to really fucking suck at times. But the idea is that there's beauty in this constant summit and ascent, constant summit and ascent. That's the beauty of life. The beauty in life is that sometimes you're going to be destroyed and you're going to have to rebuild yourself from the very bottom. And I think that's absolutely true. And that's kind of what you're saying and what Nietzsche is saying. And it's what the Hapaborean identity and what New Rome is about. We're going to accelerate towards a positive identity, which will be hyperstatized by we, the human subjects, to become something that will take struggle and will never truly be a static being. We'll be in a constant becoming, a constant striving more towards something, right? Nietzsche's will to power, best described in terms of how the human subject engages with it, is life for life's sake. We must deal with the dark and mysterious aspect of life that is insatiable, that is very tempting. Very tempting. We must create that hothouse of choice and strange plants, which Nietzsche talks about, right? So Nietzsche talks about this, guys. I've never read Nietzsche, obviously. Never read Nietzsche. I just know these things because I saw it in a dream. No, I'm kidding. I've read all of Nietzsche just once, though. I'm not an expert, but anyway. Any final sort of conversation points, Moons?
No, something kind of unrelated but related. I had a band when I was 13 named Amorphity after.
You're cutting out, Moons. The Amor Fati was too strong. You there? You with us? Still cutting out.
I can hear you.
Last thing I heard was the band Amor Fati, and then you cut out for a second. You had a band when you were 13 called Amor Fati.
Yeah, Amorphity, yeah.
Oh, what did you say after that? Oh, is that it? There wasn't a big.
I think that was, yeah.
Based, yeah. So we got a true. You were born to be a Nietzschean, right? That's your axis of beings. You just didn't know it yet. So you're gonna put all this bullshit to the side, and you're becoming Nietzschean, right? I'm just kidding.
He was the first philosopher I ever read.
There you go. So you're born to be a Nietzschean, right? First philosopher I ever read was probably like seriously read, right? It was probably Plato, which is funny. Now Plato should be esoterically reread, not as the sort of surface level Platonist, but as someone that you can actually synthesize with Nietzsche. But anyway, last thoughts, Moons. We have 287 viewers right now. That's crazy. This X stuff really helps.
I told you. I heard good things about X.
I didn't disagree with you. I just never thought about it.
Yeah, I think I do want to try doing it on my account at some point just to see like the numbers there, but
you could always we could always create a stream. Excuse me. Maybe we could either create a shared StreamYard or we can find a way where I kind of like you can remotely log into yours. So I don't know your password, or you can change your password after or whatever if you don't trust me. I don't know.
I can actually just stream this to your audience.
Oh shit. Well, next time you'll be able to do that.
Next time. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll have to have a big juicy topic that people will want to hear because this was a juicy topic. People wanted to hear about Hapaborean. They wanted to hear about Alysa Leo, who's all over the TL. And by the way, I strategically I rushed myself. I told myself I took 2 fucking nootropics before writing my essay because I was like, I have to fucking do this today because Alysa Leo is going to be gone from the timeline in like a week. So like this was the time to strike when the fucking pan is hot, wherever the hell they say. And the stream, same thing. We got to hit while the pan is hot or whatever the fuck. So I wanted to take advantage. I think Alysa Leo, she'll still be famous forever, but the whole TL craze is about to die out. So we had to strike while it's hot. That's what it is. Strike while it's hot. So yeah.
I want to talk about Epstein, but I know it's tough to talk about.
We can talk about Epstein next episode. Fuck it. Like now that we're on X, we might as well. We'll do it. I mean, people like this episode. It seems like Ganja said, "Good episode, thank you, Ganja Daddy." Oh shit, I can't believe I just said that. I'm just gonna call you Ganja, no Daddy. Love
You
the
call
stream.
him
Thank you so
Gandhi.
much, Patrick. Thank you, Ryan. He's a good friend of mine. Ryan, never met in person, but good friend. Nicola, good friend. I would say we're probably gonna meet up at some point. I was on his channel, so check out his channel as well. I did a conversation on Gunnar accelerationism. Just purchase a quarter zip. Okay. I actually don't know what that means. I feel like I should know what that means.
It's
Is
a
drug term?
sweater.
Oh
it's like
yeah. Is it like a
It's
not gay sweater, or is he saying that he's still sticking with gay fashion? Or is it
I
like a
don't know
straight
why
man's
I
jacket?
don't know why he mentioned that. It's just like a meme.
Oh, well, I love Ryan. Ryan's a good guy. He does a lot of gay shit, but we still love him. We're gonna de-gayify him. We're gonna set him up with Alysa Leo and de-gayify him. But thank you, joining us for watching. No outro today because unfortunately we were demonetized in terms of our outro, so we have to remake a new outro. I'm gonna have my good friend Faustian Futurist work on that. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Moons, for joining me. It sucks because we're just about to hit 300 viewers, and it's right when we're about to end. It's like, fuck, maybe next time we'll have to start earlier so we can go a little bit longer or something,
We can start earlier, and I can also see if I can also stream it through my Twitter account as well.
To the moon. Ero-Technica to the moon. We should start our own meme coin. Yo, we gotta start our own meme coin. And we're not gonna rug pull you guys though. No rug pulling.
But the thing is, like, you don't have to do the rug pulling. Like, someone else can do the rug pulling, right?
That's true.
There's just too much bullshit that comes with it.
Yeah. All right. No Ero-Technica coin, guys. Sorry, sad face. But thank you guys for watching. Thank you, Legionaries, for watching. If you made it this far, you will get a Roman eagle delivered to you by drone to your doorstep with a little cat guy with the propellers on his head. You're going to give him a pat on the head. He's going to give you your Roman eagle. And thank you for watching. Hail Hapaborea. We're going to hypersynthesize Hapaborea into existence. And whether you're white or Asian, you can be part of Hapaborea. If you're not, you know what? You can still create your own destiny. Manifest your own destiny. Embrace Azlatan, or whatever the fuck the Aztec Hyperborea is. Embrace that shit. If you're fucking Ethiopian, embrace the Abyssinian mythos, right? Find your own Dasein. Find your own mode of being. And let's preserve what's beautiful in the world, right? Let's not let the forces of ugliness win. Let's not let everyone just be leveled down to the same, because that's boring, right? So thank you guys for watching. Ave Nova Roma. Thank you, Moons, for being here. We will see you guys next time. This is The Warrior Philosopher, building foundations of the Warrior Philosophy, and this is Ero-Technica. See you next time.